Looking forward to this for a while. Before I actually get into my lesson, I want to say something about this chair that I'm in, because everywhere I go, people stare at me. Sometimes people come up and say, "Can I take a picture with you?" And I think they just want a picture with me. And then they say, "That's the coolest chair ever." And so they like the chair. A member of the church purchased this chair for me about a year and a half ago. Prior to that, I had been in a regular chair that you push with your hand. And this particular chair I saw on the internet. I was showing him a YouTube video of it. And the thing that really impressed me with it is it will climb stairs. One wheel will come up over another and it will climb you up the stairs. And so I was excited because it would allow me to go some places I can't normally go. But what has ended up being the best thing about this chair is that it allows me to look people eye to eye again. After 2 years in the regular chair and looking up at people constantly, you forget that it's kind of dehumanizing. And when I got to this chair and I could look people eye to eye again, it was such a great feeling. And I can ride around foyers and church buildings and just look back and forth. And I feel genuinely like I'm standing. You know, before my accident, I was 5'7", and in this chair, I'm almost 6 foot. And so that's been one of the great things about it. People always ask me, how does it do that? Do you have to stand on your own? I was told by the people that make this chair, in fact, if you're familiar with the Segway, it's the same company that makes the Segway. And I was told by the people that make it that it has hundreds of little gyroscopes in it and that they are talking to a motherboard. And it's constantly telling it to adjust this way and adjust that way. And you can watch, if I shift my weight, the chair moves to keep me in balance. So in the early days, someone would come along to shake my hand and I would reach out and run them over because, but I have learned and gotten better at that as time has gone on. Tonight, they asked me to speak about evil, pain, and suffering. And I thought about several different approaches to this. And I thought that maybe the best thing to do is to tell you about my own story, because I've had a lot of pain and suffering in the last several years. And I've learned a lot of things from that. And so that's what I'm going to do tonight. I'm going to start and tell you about what happened to me and things that I picked up along the way. And we're going to relate some things that deal with the question of why does God let these things happen? See here. 4 years ago, in May, I started a gospel meeting in Sado, Virginia at the West Side Church of Christ. This is a picture of their auditorium. But you can all see it over here? Okay. Brother Eddie Gilpin was the preacher there at the time. And Sherry traveled with me, my wife, and we got there Saturday, and we were thinking it was going to be a great, fun week together. We were going to have fellowship and spend time with the brethren, and so we arrived on Sunday, got up Sunday morning. I started preaching a gospel meeting, went through the day. When we got to that evening, Sherry and I went out to eat together at Cracker Barrel, and we were really looking forward to the week. The next day, being Monday, the preacher, Eddie, and his wife, Jeannie, invited us over to their house. That was May the 6th. They said they wanted to take us to a cafe that was nearby. And so we got there and we visited for a little while. When we got through talking, we went outside and they said, let's get on the four-wheelers and go to the cafe. And I was thinking, what kind of cafe are we going to on four-wheelers? But we got on the four-wheelers and they drove us out across their 100-acre farm. And we got to a certain area that was under the trees, and they had set up a table, and this is what they called their cafe. It was a makeshift cafe on their property. It was a beautiful day. They had the food set up, and we just thoroughly enjoyed it. When we got through eating, they asked us, would you like to take a tour of a farm? And we said, yeah, we would very much like to do that. And so we drove, and we got up to the top of the hill. Eddie and his wife, Jeannie, were on a four-wheeler, and Sherry and I were on the four-wheeler behind them. And so we traveled up to the top of the hill. This is kind of deceptive because it looks flat, but we're on the top of a hill looking down. I don't know why it looks this way, but I got out my iPhone and I took a picture. Such a beautiful place there. You can see the mountains in the background. And Eddie said to me, would you like me to take a picture of you and Sherry? And I said, sure. So he took this picture. Little did I know that this was just minutes before I was going to have my accident. We started down the hill, and Eddie and Jeannie ahead of us, Sherry and I behind them. We're riding through the hayfield, and this is where I go blank. I don't really know what happened. Apparently, we get something. The hay was, the grass was pretty tall, and it was up to probably my knees on the four-wheeler, so we couldn't see everything as well as we would like. And apparently we did something, and the four-wheeler flipped. They say it flipped 4 times. Sherry flew off in one direction and landed on the ground, and I continued flipping through the air, and when I landed, I broke my back in half. When Eddie heard it, he turned around, he stopped his four-wheeler, he ran to me, and when he got there, I was unconscious. He said he thought I was dead. Sherry was a distance away, and she could not get up, but she said she could hear Eddie calling my name, but I wasn't responding. And so she said she was praying to God, lying there on the ground, praying to God that I wasn't dead or not brain damaged. After a bit, and I still don't remember any of this, but Eddie said I came to and I started saying, I can't feel my legs. Sherry said that she could hear me, but I was kind of groaning and my speech was slurred and that I was hurting. And Eddie said I was saying, I can't breathe. Please move me. Please lift me. But he was scared to move me because he was afraid that if he picked me up, who knows what kind of damage would be done. They called an ambulance, but they were so far out, it took a long time for them to get there. When the ambulance finally arrived, the ambulance said they quickly determined that it was beyond their capability, and so they radioed in for a helicopter. The medevac helicopter came, and they loaded me in, and they flew me to the hospital in Roanoke, Virginia. Once I got there, they determined that I had a broken back and a broken sternum, a cracked C1 vertebrae at the base of my skull, and that I had severed or at least severely mangled my spinal cord. They operated, and they fused 5 vertebrae together. In fact, here is a picture. When I say that I broke my back, you can see from this MRI that literally it is broken in half. People say they broke it, and they mean they cracked it. Mine busted in half. They put it back together. In fact, this will give you an idea. You can see some of the hardware that is in my back now holding it together. When it's broken in half, it takes quite a bit to hold it back together, and I still have a great deal of pain from the hardware that's in my back. I woke up the next day or the day after, and I was utterly confused. The doctor woke me up, and I guess it was just me and the doctor, and I said, where am I? And he said, you're in the hospital. And I said, why? And he said, you were in a four-wheeler accident. And I thought back, the last thing I remembered was heading down that hill. And we laid there and talked for a minute, and he didn't mention anything to me about my condition. But as I started moving around, it occurred to me, I can't move my legs. And I said, I can't move my legs. And he said, you have severed your spinal cord, and you are paralyzed. From about this point down, I am a T6 complete, and so I feel nothing from this point down. I have no function from that point down. And at that moment, I thought it was a dream. You ever have a dream and it's so horrible and you go back to sleep and you wake up and you realize, oh, it's just a dream? That's what I thought was happening. And so I was in and out because they had me on so many pain medicines. And so I woke up a little bit later and it was still the case. I went back to sleep. And after several times, I finally realized that this was real. And it was the most devastating thing that I have ever experienced. After I spent about a week in the hospital there, they airlifted me to the Shepherd Center in Atlanta, Georgia, and I spent the next 2.5 months in rehab at Shepherd. In fact, here's a picture someone took of me. I guess this was in the hospital at Roanoke. I'm not even sure who took it. They just lost to emote here. Here we go. Someone took this picture of me in rehab, and you can see this thing that's wrapped around me, and that's because they were trying to hold me together while my back was healing, and they called it a turtle shell, was quite uncomfortable in and of itself, because where I could feel, it was digging into me, and since my neck was broken, you could say that I also had my neck wrapped. And you can tell by the look on my face that the rehab was pretty uncomfortable. After 2.5 months at the Shepherd Center, about the time that I got out, was time for polishing the pulpit. And the directors of PTP asked if I would like to come and speak at PTP. And I said I would try. I'd been out of the hospital a week or two, and they said, we want you to come and talk about your accident and some of the things that you experienced. And I agreed to do that. This is a shot someone took. There were about 5,000 people there that night. And I was in bad shape. My legs were spasming. I was an emotional wreck. It's online if you want to watch it. I broke down numerous times trying to do the lesson, but it was a very difficult lesson, but I wanted so badly to be able to do it. It's been 4 years now since that. In fact, we're about to have PTP in a few weeks, and it's been 4 years since that, and a lot has happened since then. I have endured a great deal of pain. I have had a tremendous amount of emotional pain on top of the physical pain. I still deal with the physical pain every day and emotional pain every day. I questioned a lot of things. And so when they asked me to talk about the pain and suffering, I thought I'd share some of these things with you tonight. I'm going to do 3 things tonight based on my experience. Number 1, I'm just going to make some general observations. Number 2, I'm going to talk about suffering. He's even interested in what I got to say tonight. And then I'm going to talk about getting through tragedy. All right, first, I want to make just some observations about some of the things that I've endured, some of the things that I've suffered. And all of us suffer in different ways, and so this will perhaps help you in some various things that you will face. The first observation that I want to make is that God uses broken people. Now, what do I mean by that? Before my accident, I was a very confident person. I felt like I could do anything, I could accomplish anything, but after the accident, I was just very much filled with doubt. I was very self-conscious. I told Sherry I will never be offered a good preaching job again. But you know, something that I have learned is that God uses broken people. You know, if you think about this, Moses said that he was slow of speech. That probably means he stuttered. David had all kinds of family problems. Rahab was a prostitute. Naomi, you remember, she was a widow. She'd lost her husband and her sons. And Joseph had been abused and betrayed by his brothers, his own family. Abraham was old. Paul was a Pharisee who'd been killing God's people. I could go on and on and on with examples about this. But what we cannot allow ourselves to do is to become like the one-talent man who became afraid and he went and hid his talent in the ground. There was an older, wise Christian man who said to me, Don, nobody has a greater witness than the person who's been broken. And what he meant by that is, once you've experienced these things, you can talk from a place of experience. Do you remember that on one occasion, Job chapter 1, God has a conversation with Satan. And Satan says to God, first God says to Satan, have you considered my servant Job? There's none like him in all the earth, a perfect man, one who is upright, fears God, and hates evil. And the devil says to him, does Job fear God for nothing? Have you not made a hedge around him and his household and everything that he has in his hands? He says, you have blessed him and the work of his hands, that you have increased his possessions. But you stretch out your hand now and you touch all that he has, and he will curse you to your face. That is, he said, the only reason God serves you is because, the only reason he serves God is because you blessed him. He's got it made. He's living the good life. You let something bad happen to him, he'll change. And so when bad things happen to us, that's when it tests our faith. That's when we see what we're made of. That's when we see if we're going to keep serving God. God uses broken people. Here's the second thing. I have learned that grief has no timeline. You know, I was 47 years old when the accident happened. I'm 51 now. And for 47 years, I just virtually had a life of roses. Everything was good. I'd never had any hardship, and I just couldn't relate to these things. Last 4 years been hard. Changes your perspective. When you're a young person and everything is good for you, it's hard to understand these things. When I was in the hospital, I received approximately 2,800 cards. I don't mean electronic, I mean paper cards. And I know that because my dad was there every day, and he was bored, and he counted every single card that would come in, and he made a stroke sheet. And he said, why don't we hang them up in your room? And so he literally had every spot in my room covered in cards. And I went looking for a picture, and I found this picture that gives you a little bit of an idea what it looked like. And so everyone who would come in would say, wow, what is this? The man in the mailroom said he worked there for like 14 years, and he'd never seen anything like that. I remember someone coming in and saying, are you somebody famous? And I said, I'm a Christian. I said, that's what Christians do. I was in the hospital at the same time with Kenny Rogers. And you older people know who Kenny Rogers is. He passed away just a few months ago. But Kenny Rogers, super nice guy. I got to visit with him while I was there. Somebody said, Kenny Rogers didn't get as many cards as you did. I said, well, Kenny Rogers was a Christian. We were not able to do anything about that while we were there, though we made an effort. When I got home from the hospital, the cards kept coming. In fact, I got to about 4,000 cards, and then they started slowing down, and that was natural. But the grief didn't stop. In fact, the grief got worse, because when I was at the hospital, everybody there was a paraplegic or quadriplegic, and many of them worse than me. They were all in wheelchairs. I got home, and I'm by myself. I couldn't get my wheelchair under my desk, and that was frustrating with me. I couldn't reach into my filing cabinet to get things out, and that was irritating. I went out and I tried to get in my truck. I bought a brand new truck just before I had my accident. I couldn't get up in there. It's just too hard. Sherry and I used to walk the neighborhood together at night. Of course, I couldn't do that. So many of the physical pleasures I had been taken away. Things that I used to do to help other people, I couldn't do it anymore. You know, Sherry and I had been married at that point, yes, approaching 30 years. And in all those years, she virtually never put gas in the car because I said, I can take care of that. I kept the car gassed up. It's hard for me to do. And then there was the regiment of 25 pills a day that I was taking. All the physical issues. In addition to those things, there were emotional issues that I won't even start to tell you about. Here's the point. The cards stop, but life goes on. You go back to work. People ask you every day how you're doing, but people, they really don't want to hear about all the pain that you suffer all the time. And so you put on a happy face and you do the best that you can. There's a loneliness that comes with all of this. Nobody really understands it unless they've been there. When I see another paraplegic, I kind of get excited because they get it. They know. But it made me realize that there are brethren all around the world who are experiencing different types of pain, but pain nonetheless. Since I did that lesson at PTP a few years ago, I've had widows and widowers reach out to me, people who have lost children, people who have gone through divorce, all sorts of things. But here's the point I'm making here. The pain goes on, and yet people stop checking. The cards stop coming. Some people have told me that after they lost their spouse, their name was in the bulletin for a few weeks or months, and then they stopped, but they're still aching years after it passes. Here's something else I want to tell you. I learned some things about God's will. Since my accident, I repeatedly have had people say to me, well, Don, this happened for a reason, or it was God's will, or words to that effect. I don't believe that for a second. If we are not careful, we get dangerously close to Calvinism, and we start suggesting God did this to me. We start suggesting that God causes everything, but the fact of the matter is God has given us free will, and He allows us to suffer the consequences of our actions, and we suffer the consequences many times of other people's actions. You know, sometimes there'll be a situation where maybe there is a drunk driver, and he will maybe hit and kill a little child. And then at the funeral, there will be a person who's got good intentions, and they will go to the parents of that grieving parents of that little child, and they'll say something like this: God must have wanted your baby in heaven. God must have taken your baby. No wonder people get angry at God. That wasn't God's will. That was a violation of God's will. Somebody violated God's will and got drunk and sinned, and as a result of that, they killed that baby. We need to be careful, and we need to understand not everything that happens is God's will. Now, we are considering evil, pain, and suffering. Think about this subject from the standpoint of the person who believes God did this to me. You know, when you think about this, many people that hold to the Calvinistic idea that God makes everything that happens happen, they believe that God predetermines who is saved and who's lost. You go to hell on the day of judgment, it will be because God foreordained that. The Bible doesn't teach that. Now, don't get me wrong. When you have a terrible accident like this, or something terrible happens to you, that doesn't mean that God can't use it. After my accident, there have been some good things that have happened as a result of it. When we got back home, we were converting my bathroom so that a shower so that I could roll in and shower. And we had 4 contractors who were working in the house. And during that time, we were able to study with and baptize all 4 of the contractors who were working in our house. In fact, here is a picture of them after their baptism. The fella in the orange shirt, he has been very faithful. He had been teaching. About a year ago, he baptized his daughter. He has even been talking about going on to the school of preaching. I believe that the Lord providentially has used this good, has come out of the bad. I believe that's Romans 8:28. All things work together for good for them that love the Lord. No matter what man does that is bad, even if we suffer the consequences of it, God can still use it to accomplish good. Here's something else that I'm going to mention to you, and then we're going to get into our real question tonight. To live is Christ, and to die is gain. Of course, that's Philippians 1:21. And verse 23 says, Paul said, I am hard pressed between 2 things. The King James says that I am in a twixt between 2 things. We don't say that. It means I'm stuck between 2 hard decisions. Having a desire to depart and be with the Lord, which is far better, but to remain and be with you, he's saying that's better for the church. You need me, but it would be, listen, better to die and to go be with the Lord. Now, that doesn't mean that Christians should be suicidal. But what that does mean is I need to understand that life beyond this is better than this life. Sometimes I hear someone say, how are you doing? Well, I'm still breathing and beats the alternative. If you're Christian, it doesn't beat the alternative. Christian, Paul said, for me to live is Christ. That means while I'm living on this earth, I'm going to live for the Lord. And then when I die, That's even better. All right, let me get to the real meat of this lesson, and that is suffering. I should have made that red. You can't see that very much, but suffering. One of the accusations that atheists like to make against Christianity and the existence of God is this. They say, if there really is a God who loves people, why in the world would he allow pain and suffering? In fact, we've been hearing this question from skeptics for years. In the 3rd century BC, Epicurus made this argument. He laid it out in syllogistic argument form, and he said it this way: if there's a God who loves us, then he can't be all-powerful because humans experience pain and suffering. And since we experience pain and suffering, either there is not a God who loves us, that is, God doesn't exist, or if there is a God who loves us, then he's not strong enough to do anything about it. That's the argument of the skeptics. But the fact of the matter is, there are some really good things that come from suffering. You see, that's what they're missing. They think all suffering is bad, and there are bad things that come from suffering. But you know, from exercising and working out, you remember the old saying, no pain, no gain? There's some gain that comes from breaking down that muscle. In fact, if you really, really work out and you haven't done it in a while, how do you feel the next day? How do you feel the day after that? That's when the pain sets in. Pain oftentimes brings good. I want to show you some good things that actually come from suffering. And these are things that I have learned. Number one, suffering teaches us to pray. I will admit to you, particularly in the first couple of years after my accident, I struggled with prayer. And it's a little embarrassing. I'm a little ashamed to say that. You say, you've been a Christian for years. You've been a preacher and you struggled with prayer. Yeah, I did, because God didn't seem like he was answering it. I was begging God. I was putting on Facebook to thousands of people, please pray for me that my pain will stop, that I can walk again. And week after week, day after day, month after month passed, and I was still hurting and I still couldn't walk. And it seemed like my prayers are working. And then there's the emotional pain that's even worse than the physical pain. But it caused me to dig and study prayer unlike I had ever studied it before. I want to share with you some things that I learned that have been very helpful to me. Maybe they'd be helpful to you. In 2 Corinthians chapter 12, the Apostle Paul says this, "And lest I should be exalted above measure by the abundance of revelation." That is, he's saying, I have a lot of revelations of the Holy Spirit, and that might go to my head. Lest I should be exalted above measure, he says, a thorn in the flesh was given to me. I've oftentimes heard preachers say God gave him the thorn in the flesh. I don't believe that, and I don't think that's what Paul said. He says, a thorn in the flesh was given to me, a messenger of Satan to buffet me. Where'd this messenger come from? He says, a messenger of Satan was given me to buffet me, lest I should be exalted above measure. Concerning this thing, I pleaded with the Lord 3 times that he would take it from me. What is Paul saying? I had this terrible thing that happened. It came from the devil. I prayed to the Lord 3 times that he would take it away, but the Lord said, no. He said, it's in your best interest that I don't take it away. He told Paul no. Then I noticed this. Luke 22 and verse 41, the Bible says about Jesus. He knelt down and he prayed, saying, Father, if it's your will, take this cup away from me. Nevertheless, not my will be done. Then an angel appeared unto him from heaven, strengthening him. And he, being in agony, prayed more earnestly. Then sweat came down, as it were, as great drops falling down to the ground. Mark 14:39 says, he went and he prayed again. The same thing, prayed the same prayer again. Matthew 26 and verse 44 says, he left and anyway went away a 3rd time. And he prayed the same word. And the answer that he got was essentially no. The Lord said no to his son. He said no to Paul. Jesus is praying earnestly in agony with sweat drops as blood, and he prayed repeatedly, and the Father said no. Why is that? I think the answer is this: because the will of the Father needed to be done. It was in Paul's best interest. It was in our best interest. And it got me to thinking, could it be that while I'm worried about my physical pain that I'm going to endure for just a season, the Lord's got something better in mind? Maybe He's strengthening me through this. Maybe there are individuals who can be reached because of my condition. Maybe there's someone who's proud, and maybe they'll be brought down because of my condition. It wasn't very long ago. I'm living in Cookeville, Tennessee now. I got a call from someone who was at the local rehabilitation center. They said, we have a fella who's been shot. He was an innocent guy, but he got caught in a most unfortunate situation. Not a member of the church. He got shot 3 times in his apartment. One bullet went through his arm. One of the shots from the Glock lodged in his neck, and it was still there, and the other pierced his spinal cord. He's 26 years old, never been married. He's a paraplegic now, and he's in worse shape than me. He can't really use his hands either. I went to see him. We studied over a period of weeks, and we baptized him. We had to bring an inflatable pool into the hospital. We had to get a lift to pick him up and sit him into this pool, and we baptized him there in the hospital. Would that have happened if I hadn't been in this situation? I don't know, but maybe the Lord is using this for good, and maybe it's best from the scheme of eternity looking back that I stay in this situation. Let me skip ahead to the next one here. Suffering has a benefit in that it humbles us. This entire instance that I have been in, it has humbled me like you don't know. Before this accident, I was physically strong. Financially, I was well off. I had control of my life. And when everything is going your way, it is easy to get full of yourself. Sometimes you don't even realize you're full of yourself, but you get very self-sufficient and you can get high-minded. But an accident like this makes you realize how much you depend on God. There was a whole team of highly qualified doctors who could do nothing about my situation. And it made me realize how much I was in the hands of God. An accident like this humbles you in ways that I've never been humbled. I watched my 77-year-old dad picking up my lame body and carrying me around, and that's humbling. I've had several situations where I would go to the Gospel Broadcasting Network, and I've got a ramp. My van's right out here. I've got a ramp that comes out the side, and I can roll in and drive with my hands. And on a couple of occasions, several occasions actually, I'm coming down the ramp in my regular chair, and when I get to the bottom, it would hit a rock or something, and it would throw me out on the ground. One occasion, it was summertime. I got to GPN. I hit a rock. I'm out there by myself. The gravel was hot because it's summer in Mississippi. I'm laying in there. It cut my leg. I'm bleeding through my pants. I can't get up. I can't get back in my chair, and there's no one around. I see another one of the GPN employees pull in, and I'm waving to him to come back. I'm yelling, and he comes back there, and he picks me up, and he holds me close to him so that he can pick me up. And I was so humiliated. I don't know why. I should have been humiliated. I couldn't do anything about it, but it's humiliating. Sometimes humility helps us. I think about the book of Daniel. I think about Nebuchadnezzar. It took a good dose of humility to bring him down. He was made to think he was a cow until he realized the Most High rules in the kingdoms of men. Here's the next one. Suffering makes sympathetic toward other people. Romans chapter 12 and verse 15 says that we are to weep with those who weep. Sometimes it's hard to weep with those who weep when you've had nothing but a life of roses. Galatians 5:22 says, one of the fruits of the Spirit is kindness. What's the fruit of the Spirit? The Holy Spirit gave us the Word of God, and as you study it and make application of it to your life, it's going to teach you to be kind to other people. You say, what does that have to do with suffering? This accident, it's taught me to be more kind to other people. I'm more patient with other people. I'll give you an example of this. It used to be somebody would pull out in front of me in their car, and I would think, get out of my way. Why are you taking so long? Now somebody pulls out in front of me, and you know what I think? Now, maybe they got a wheelchair in the back of their car. They're trying not to sling around like I do. Makes you think about things differently. I've had so many people come to me and tell me about the loss of their spouse, the death of their child, cancer, divorces, even miscarriages, and they're hurting. And they share it because they're looking for some comfort. I never knew how much people were hurting. People are around us and they're hurting in different ways. Makes you realize that you're not alone. Makes me realize that I'm not alone. Here's another benefit that comes from suffering. That atheist would say, suffering's just bad. A God in heaven wouldn't allow this. But think about this, the way that God strengthens us, benefits us, helps us. Suffering purifies us. What do I mean by that? Think about the benefit of this. When I realized how close I came to dying, it made me search my life for shortcomings and for sin. When I realized at any moment, think about this. I'm riding along having fun, and I open my eyes. I'm in the hospital. What if I had opened my eyes and I was in eternity? That very well could have happened. You said, Don, you're a preacher, you're a Christian. But I'm telling you, when that happens, it makes you stop and think, is there anything in my life I need to change? Is that biblical? 2 Corinthians 13:5, examine yourselves whether you be in the faith. Sometimes people have thought, whether you be in the faith, that means whether you're a Christian. Now, that was written to Christians. What does that mean? Examine yourself to see if you're walking in the faith. Test yourself. See if you're walking in light. 1 John 1:7-9. Listen to what David said. Psalm 119 and verse 67. Ponder this carefully. David said, I went astray before I was afflicted. Psalm 119 and verse 71. 4 verses later, he says, it is good for me that I've been afflicted, that I might learn your statutes. What does he mean? The suffering that I've endured made me dig into the Word of God. It's made me become more faithful. You see, there's good that comes from this. There are some days that I sit back and I'm actually thankful for this. Now, I'm not saying I like it, but I'm saying that there's some good things that come from that. Let me get to the last point here. I know I can get long-winded. I could talk about this all night. I want to talk to you about dealing with this. Getting through suffering and tragedy. I've had people say to me, God, I don't know how you do it. I don't understand. I would just curl up and die. I just wouldn't leave my house. How do you do it? You don't have any choice. What else do you do? I want to make some suggestions. Number one, I have just learned from experience, don't live in the past. I want you to listen to this passage I ran across one day, and it was like a light bulb came on for me. Ecclesiastes 7:10 says, do not say, why were the former days better than these? For you do not inquire wisely when you say this. What does that mean? Don't look at the past and say, why was it better back then than it is now? One of the greatest torments that I have found is living in the past. When I sit and I start thinking, oh, it was so good before I had this accident, that takes me to bad places. And it can be almost anything, even something simple like, I think about what it used to be like when I would cut the grass. You say, I don't like to cut the grass. I didn't either, but I like to walk around and smell the fresh cut grass afterwards. I miss that. I miss places I used to go. I even miss jumping out of the car when it's freezing in the winter and I'm out there shivering, pumping gas. And you would think, who would have missed that? And I wouldn't have thought I would, but I do. I think, man, I wish I could jump out and get that, do that. I found that living in the past is the great tormentor. You know, some people do this with regard to sin. Some people beat themselves up over things they've done in the past, things they can't change, and they can't get beyond it. But you know the thing about the past? It's in the past. You can't go back into the past. Listen to this. Paul says in Philippians 3:13, this one thing I do, forgetting those things that are behind and reaching forth unto those things that are before, I press forward toward the mark of the prize of our high calling of God, which is in Christ Jesus. I used to think, and I used to teach, when Paul said, forgetting those things that are behind, I used to think that he was talking about the things he did when he persecuted Christians. Forgetting those things that were haunting him. And maybe that's included in it. But the more I studied that chapter, I don't think that's what he's talking about. I think he's talking about what he used to have in this life. I was a Pharisee amongst Pharisees. I had it all. Finances, prestige. I was living the life. And then he says, I count all that but dung. Those things I had in the past, I put those behind. I think that's what he's talking about primarily, because life's hard now. I'm not going places as far as this life is concerned. In fact, what he had now was shipwrecks and beatings and difficulties and night and day with tears, Acts chapter 20. Let me move on. How do you deal with this? Number 2, count your blessings. We know the song, count your many blessings, name them one by one, and it will surprise you what the Lord has done. Did you know that straight out of the Bible? Psalm 103 and verse 2, bless the Lord, O my soul, and do not forget to count your blessings. Count your blessing. Some days, I kind of have a pity party, and I get to thinking, I have it worse than anybody. Who has it worse than me? I'm a paraplegic. I hurt all the time. I can't do this. I can't do that. My life, I used to have it so good. It's all been taken away from me. I can't. Nobody has it worse than me. But then I get to thinking about the fact I can still work. I still have a job. Still have a wife who loves me and stays with me. When I was in the Shepherd Center, they said a large percentage of spouses after an accident like this, they check out. And they say something like, I didn't sign up for this. I'm out of here. And now here's this new paraplegic who is all by themselves and dealing with their grief and pain. And I get to thinking about things like that. And I think, man, nobody's got it better than I do. Now, what am I saying? I'm saying it's a matter of perspective. So much of life. Listen to me, young people. Listen to me, old people. I see a few old people out there. Actually, several. But listen to what I'm saying. So much of life is what we do with our minds. Listen to the children of Israel. Numbers chapter 11. God has rescued them from Israel. He's rescued them from Egypt, rather. He's giving them food from heaven. He's taking care of them. He said, your clothes never wear out. Your shoes never wear out. I said to Sherry one day, wouldn't that be awesome? Your shoes never wear out and you don't have to buy new shoes. She said, I like to buy new shoes, but that's beside the point. God's taking care of them. What should their attitude be? Listen what they said. Numbers 11 and verse 4, they said, who will give us meat to eat? We remembered the feast that we ate freely when we were in Egypt, and the cucumbers and the melons and the leeks and the garlic and the onions. Now listen to this next statement. But now our whole being is dried up, and we have nothing to eat except this manna. Can you believe that? God's rescued them, and they said, all we have to eat is the manna from heaven. We wish we had some of those onions that we used to get from the Egyptians. You see the perspective in their minds? One thing I know is this. When I stop counting my bruises and I count my blessing, it changes my feelings. Here's the next one. I have to remember why I am here. This helps me. This helps me more than anything else. And this will answer the argument of the atheist, of the skeptic, because they say, why does God allow suffering? You got to remember why you're here. You see, they think that we're here just to live it up and enjoy life, and if something bad happens, well, then that throws a wrench in everything. Why are we here? I want to read you a quote from a book called Let This Cup Pass. Jane McWhorter, who lived not far from here in Fayette, Alabama, she had a bad car accident, and she wrote this book, and she made this great quote. We are here on this earth to prepare ourselves for life after death. It doesn't matter whether we live 50 years or 100 years. Neither does it matter whether those years are carefree or filled with sorrow. The only consideration of lasting importance is where we will spend eternity. You see, sometimes I'm thinking, I'm so unhappy because I miss my truck, or I miss my whatever, as you name the little physical pleasure, you fill in the blank. I'm afraid we have fallen into the trap of thinking, I'm here so that I can fix up my house. I'm here so that I can take vacation. I'm here so that I can have a motorcycle and a bike. And if you take those things away, then my life is so miserable. I got to remember, that's not why I'm here. John 9 and verse 4, Jesus said, I must work the works of him that sent me while it is day, for the night cometh when no man can work. That's why I'm here. Jesus said, I am here to do the work of the Father. Sometimes suffering makes me better at that. Sometimes suffering makes me stronger. Sometimes it makes me a better servant. Sometimes it makes me more a nice statue, like David said. Sometimes it makes me more sympathetic to other people. Sometimes it makes me humble. Sometimes it might take away a stumbling block, like Paul said, lest I be exalted above measure. You see, suffering makes me better for the reason that I've been put here. And that's what the atheist doesn't understand. Ecclesiastes 12 and verse 13, let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. This is the whole of man, is what the text says. I don't know how long I'm suffering, how long I've been talking here, but if I just keep going on and on, you'll get a little dose of suffering. So let me do a little bit more here. The fact of the matter is, suffering can help us with regard to our efforts to God. I'm going to make this the last point. Christianity makes all of the difference. Christianity makes all the difference. One day when I was in the hospital, in fact, I know the exact day because it was Father's Day, 2019, my daughter, Lauren, and her husband, Casey, came to visit me. And when they left, I was very lonely. A lot of times when your family leaves, even at the holidays, there's an emptiness. But when they left the hospital that day, I was very, very lonely. And my iPhone beeped, and it said, you've received a message, a memory, it said. You know, your iPhone does this weird thing. It takes your pictures, it will put them to music, make a little video, calls it a memory. Well, I was very curious. I opened it up. And it was a video that my phone had made me from a Disney trip that my family had made on Father's Day a few years before. And there was a picture of my family together, and I'm standing there with them, tall and strong. I've got my arms wrapped around them. And it brought me very low. I just couldn't hold it together. And I rolled over in the bed and I pulled the cover over me because I was crying so hard. I didn't want Sherry to see me like that. I didn't want to make her more sad. And I thought to myself, how am I going to go on like this? I can't live like this. And then I thought to myself, I'm a Christian. And then I thought, this is all temporary. And I'm going to die, and I'm going to go to heaven. And then my mind got to thinking to all the people who were around me in the hospital, and I got to thinking, that's real misery. Can you imagine living your life as a paraplegic or a quadriplegic and dying and being lost? Or living your life healthy and dying and being lost? That puts it in perspective. I've got a mission. I want to reach people with the gospel. And I started trying to go to people's rooms. I started getting copies of the video, Why Are There So Many Churches, and Where Do We Go When We Die? And I started trying to give it to staff, trying to set up studies with nurses, trying to talk to other people. It made me realize I've lost a lot of who I am. I can't do what I used to do. And it made me realize and think, whether I'm a one-talent man or a two-talent man or a five-talent man or a five-talent man or a two-talent man who used to be a five-talent man, whatever I am, I've got to use those talents to reach souls with the gospel. And good can come from to suffer. I'm going to give you one point, and I'm going to extend the Lord's invitation. If somebody came to me, in fact, here was the picture. I ran across it one day. This is the picture. We look so happy, but, oh, it brought me so low. Now that I've got this chair, maybe we can go back, although I don't know if I want to go to Disney anymore. They've lost their minds over there. If I could trade all of my earthly possessions, if somebody came to me and said, Don, if you would give us all of your earthly possessions, you give us your house, your car, every bit of money in the bank, you give up your job, you will have absolutely nothing, but your body will be back like it was before. Would you do it? I wouldn't even stop to think. I wouldn't even stop to talk to Sherry. I'd say, done. It's done. But there's one thing that I would never trade, and that's my soul. That's because the Lord asked the question in Matthew 16:26, for what is a man profited if he shall gain the whole world and yet lose his own soul? Or what shall a man give in exchange for his soul? I'm telling you tonight, there is nothing on this earth that is worth your soul. And if you're here and you've not obeyed the gospel to be a part of the church that Jesus Christ purchased with his blood, there's only one. In the Bible, you read about only one. That hasn't changed. There's 43,000+ in the world today. In the Bible, there's still only one that the Lord bought with his blood. Tonight, you can be a part of that. The way you do it is not one of the 43,000 ways that exist, but it's the way that the Lord taught in the first century. By hearing the gospel, believing it, repenting of your sins, confessing your faith in Christ, and being baptized in water so that Jesus will be applied to you. That's how you were saved, by faith, an obedient, saving faith that complies with the will of the Lord. Maybe tonight you want to do that. We are ready to assist you. I'm sure there's water around here that we can baptize you. Maybe you say you want to study tonight, and we'll do that. I'm driving home to Cookville tonight, and I've got a long way to go. But if you want to study, I'll stay and study with you because it's important. Maybe you're a Christian. You've got some things that you need to fix. Maybe you examine yourself whether you're in the faith, 2 Corinthians 13:5, and you say, I haven't been, but I'm going to go to bed tonight and put my head on my pillow knowing that for the purpose I'm here, I'm doing that. We would count it a great honor. We could go together and pray for you tonight. If you need to respond to the Lord's invitation this evening, won't you do so as together we stand and sing the invitations.